Okay, I think that we can start now. So, first of all, thank you to join this webinar. So, today our goal is to give you a new view of our MyMove platform, our technology in general, with the focus with a specific tool that we developed during our months for the till meters in particular. So, first of all, just an introduction of myself. I'm Paolo Delellis. I'm a software engineer, and in Move, I am the pre-sale and the customer success director. So, follow the different customer during the pre-sale and the post-sale activities. What we cover today. So today, I told you our goal is to give you an idea of our solutions, focus on our system that you can divide into different parts. One is the hardware part, but of course we have also the software part that you can use to understand, analyze the different structure that you have. But our webinar today is focused for in using the tiltmeters and the tool created with the tiltmeters. So we start from a general introduction of the system, and after we go directly on the use of the tiltmeters in two different tools, and we leave your feedback and answer a question at the end of the webinar. So feel free to write your answer directly in the box, and at the end of the webinar, we try to answer your question. So just introduction of the company. You know, Move Solution is a young company, but our story started in 2017. We have now our company increased in the last years in the market, the application, and the solution, because our idea is to try to provide our customer not only hardware solutions, not only a software solution, but a complete solution that can cover and can answer to the different goals that the customer and the application require. So, Move Solutions provide to you a hardware and a software solution that you can use in a different way. You know, our system architecture, starting from the hardware part, you can divide into different type of sensor that using the LoRaWAN protocol send the information to the gateway that is the receipt unit of the entire system. With the gateway, you can cover a very huge area, and the gateway transmit all the information using internet communication to a server. In the server, you have the possibility to see all the information that you require directly on the MyMove platform, and is the focus of today. But of course, you are free to export the information in another platform. So the hardware, we can divide into different type. So you can have a static sensor, and the telemeter is part of this type of sensor, but also a dynamic sensor that uses the LoRaWAN protocol. And this type of sensor is the main part of our activity because make our unique in the market with this type of technology and wireless communication. But now I want to show you some new release that we did in this day, in this month, in our MyMove platform. You need to think that our platform is not only a data explorer center for the different data that you obtain from the sensor that you install on the on the application, on the structure. Our MyMove platform is a software that allow you to manage, explore, and analyze all the information that you collect from our system or other system. To do this, we in the time we develop and we the structure in different layers. For example, one of the last release that we did in these days is the user management. So the platform now have a organization that you can access directly with the organization. You can have different level of access to the different project. So not only a single username for all the project in your organization, but you can have a rule in a different project that you have in your organization. So you can have a admin permission, operator, or a simple viewer for the single project. So a management for the start from the user, but also now the visualization of the data and the visualization of your structure is not only a static picture, but you have the possibility to install your sensor in a map. So in the map, you have the possibility to locate your sensor and see the sensor in the specific location. This is another visualization that is very important for different type of application. But of course, our system allow you to configure all the sensor in different way remotely. So you can install the sensor in a different way. And for example, one of the last feature that we released for the new version of the sensor, also for example, for the tiltmeters, is the possibility to configure the axis remotely directly from your desk. And this is something that is very important for make easier the installation phase for you. But of course, another important step in our technology, in our software, is to give the possibility to connect not only our sensor to our platform, but also to have the possibility to integrate directly uh, third-part device. Third-part device, like for example, total station, like for example, camera, or other type of sensor that you have, for example, already installed in the structure or in the other application, you have the possibility to import all the information in our MyMove platform. Automatically, of course, but also manually. So, for example, with a simple CSV. All this data you can for sure analyze. So simple analysis, looking, for example, the trend that you obtain from the different sensor. And also you have the possibility to obtain directly from the platform and set directly on the platform three different levels of alarms. So from alert to warning. But I told you that our goal is to not give you only a visualization platform, but to give you something that you can use for your day by day activity. And so you have the possibility to, for example, export all this information using reports that automatically change the data that you insert on the report, and you can schedule, for example, a report every 7 weeks, so you 7 days, so you can obtain automatically a report every 7 days or months or year. So you are free to share this information using, for example, the reports, and you can schedule your reports in different way. But the goal is to simplify the analysis of the result that you obtain from the different sensor. To do this, we have different type of tools that you can use. And of course, our goal today is to discover more two of these two tools that we have in our portfolio. One of these is for example, analytics. Is a simple tool that allows to make the correlation between different parameters that you have on your platform, and you can combine different parameters together to see if there is a correlation or not. But of course, we have advanced tools that you can find on the platform, like, for example, the model analysis tool, focus with the dynamic part of the sensor that allow you to obtain frequencies and model shape directly for your structure. But we have other tools that now we go more in detail. For example, for with the static deflection and the tilt meter chain tool that allow, for example, to obtain a displacement starting from an angles. And this is a advantage that you can use, and you can understand better the result and the movement of your structure starting from a angle value. Of course, we had another part, another tool in the platform that allow you to simplify the activities that you need to do on the platform. For example, if you need to create a chart to correlate two different information, or you want only, for example, to see the maximum value of the different sensor that you have in all the structure, you have the possibility to use, for example, Move Intelligence. Move Intelligence is something that we are developing, and you already find the Move Intelligence in the platform, and you can, of course, use, and of course, allow you to simplify the analysis of the data that you obtain from the tools and from the sensor that you have in the platform. But now we go directly on the topic of the webinar that we have today. So we know very well that in the field of the structure, it's important to monitor two different type of parameters. One is a dynamic parameter, the other is static parameters. Of course, with our sensor, you can monitor both, because I told you we have a specific sensor like the accelerometer, the vibrometer, and the dynamic displacement sensor that allow you to monitor the vibration, the response of the structure to this type of vibration. But of course, it's important to understand also the slow movement of the structure with the static sensor. In particular, we have different type of sensors, but today we focus on the tiltmeters. The tiltmeters, I think that is a incredible sensor because it is a simple sensor. This is our last version of the sensor that you already I think that you already use for your application, that allow you to monitor, of course, two angles and the temperature and other parameters, like, for example, the peak of acceleration or the RMS. So other parameter is a complete sensor that you can use, for example, with the DOM for the web application, or for other type of structure that has different type of features that we can find focus and specific for the sensor. Of course, you can have three different levels of alarm, start from alert, warning, and critical. The sensor can have two different type of activation mode. One is a cadence acquisition, so you can decide a cadence and for example every 30 seconds or 2 minutes or 1 hour you can record events, but also you can activate the sensor using, for example, a trigger. So if you have, for example, and you monitor a structure with a cadence of 1 hour, if something happen on the structure between one acquisition and the other, if you activate this type of functionality, you have the possibility to record an event immediately after the exceptional event. And this is important to monitor the structure 24 hours 7. All the sensors are plug and play, so plug and play, and you can use on the different application also in harsh environmental. So you have also the possibility to install in different type of structure, in different type of condition, and the sensor work perfect without problem. The battery life is increased respect, for example, the last version, because now you can obtain more than 80 years with 2 minutes of acquisition, and more if you consider 30 minutes of acquisition, you can arrive at 11 years and so on. So the battery life is incredible. But I want to highlight the data stability of the sensor. It's not a simple tiltmeter that give you inclination, so angles, phi and theta angles, and the temperature, but give you also other two important parameters, the acceleration peak and the RMS. There are two parameters that you can use to understand, for example, if during your acquisition, static acquisition, there was, for example, uh, um, high vibration or not. So it is important to understand if your data is good or not to use for your analysis. But start from the data that the sensor can record and the Q angle that the sensor can record. Of course, you can tell to me, okay, Paolo, the sensor give you a good quality of the data. I read two different angles, phi and theta, but for example, for me, it's important to have not these angles, but have, for example, a displacement, because, for example, with the total station, usually take the distance and not angles. So to try to go more confident with our system and with our data that we collect from the system, uh, we developed these two different tools, the tilt meter chain tool and the static deflection tool. These two tools, starting from a chain of tilt meters, allow you to obtain a displacement in two different ways, of course. But you can use these two tools in different applications. I show you, for example, some example. Vertical structure and retaining wall. For example, the thin meter chain tool you can use in or vertical section or in horizontal section to obtain the displacement of the different floors that you have on your, for example, structure, or to understand the stability of the structure in general over the time. And you can see how your vertical section change over the time. Or, for example, in bridge and viaduct, very often our customer require to uh, understand the maximum deflection of the span, for example, or during load test or during the normal activity. And you can use, for example, the static deflection tool to understand the maximum deflection and see how the deflection change over the time. The same way, for example, you can use in a building or in floors, for example, in the parking of a building where you have different load that every day go over the specific floors, you can understand the deflection, and after the unload of the structure, you can understand if the structure return to the normal value or remain with a specific displacement. Another application, for example, could be the rail, where, for example, when you need to understand the vertical displacement of your truck, you can install a chain of T-beam and you can monitor the vertical displacement in the different point. So this is to give you an idea of the possible application that we can cover with the tool. But of course, we can use, of course, in other different way. Go more in detail with the tool. So I told you the tiltmeter chain tool allow you to create two different type of chain, a vertical chain or horizontal chain. In the platform, you have only to decide the series of and the chain of the meter that you install on your vertical section or horizontal section. After this, you can create your group on the platform and automatically the tool start to give you a displacement. So basically, this type of tool start from a value that is zero. You can see here, for example, you can see that the chain starts from a fixed point that is zero. From this point, you have the relative displacement of the different segments that you have in your chain, and you obtain the different movement of your segment. And this is important to discretize, for example, or a vertical section or a horizontal section to understand, for example, in one case, the stability of, for example, you can make, in this case, to use this tool for a tower or, for example, for a pole, you can use this tool to understand the movement over the time of the tower, for example, or if you use an horizontal way, you can understand, for example, if there is some type of work under, for example, your building, if there is a differential displacement between one part of the structure to the other. So the tool need to start from an initial point that is zero. After this, you have the relative displacement from the initial point. So you can have, for example, an absolute value and a relative value, a differential value. I think that is important to highlight that, for example, with the tool, we give this the possibility to the customer to zero the tool directly in the tool and not in the sensor setting. So you can perform the zeroing of the sensor independently with the zero of the tool. And this is important because you are free to install the sensor in your structure and after, I don't know, 1 month, use this tool and perform the zeroing only for the tools and not for the entire sensor that you have in your structure. So the tool go in parallel with the data that you have on from the sensor. The other important tool that we release in, I think, in April or March is the static deflection tool. The static deflection tool we already have in the old version of the platform, but we want to increase the data that you can obtain from the tool, and so you can find with a new UI. But of course, you have the possibility to obtain, starting from the data that the sensor collect from the angles that the sensor collect, and that you still, for example, in a chain, in a or a span of a bridge, or in a beam, for example, you had the possibility with a polynomial function to obtain the deformation or and the shape of your structure. And this is important because is a method that allow you to understand, for example, during load test, the maximum static displacement that you have from your structure. So you can obtain the maximum displacement. You can see directly the inclination for the different sensor that you obtain, that you have on the chain. And you can see, of course, a chart that allow you to understand the different phase of the load. So when there is the load on, for example, in your structure, or for example, you don't have nothing over the specific beam or span in general. It's important to highlight that you have also the possibility to overlay different different deflection events together. So you can see together, for example, the different phase also in the same chart. But of course, is incredible the tool, but how is simple to configure this type of tool in our platform? Because of course the result is good. I think it's important to know that the result, but the configuration and the procedure that I need to follow to configure the tool in the platform are easier or not? And the answer yes. Very easy, user friendly. You have only to select the sensor and the distance that you have in your, for example, chain. So you need to know only the length of your beam, of your span, for example, in this case. You need to choose one or the other angles, the phi or the theta angles. You have to decide the distance between one sensor and the originating point. After this, the configuration of the tool is practically done, because you have only to apply a new zeroing of on the tool configuration part, and you select the event that you want, and automatically the system select the event and apply the zero. After this, you start the monitoring your deflection, and you obtain a chart like this practically. You obtain, of course, the different events that you can analyze one and the other one, but of course you can combine together different deflection parameter and result, and also you have this type of chart that allow you to understand the different trends that you have on the with the static deflection tool. And for example, you can see here that you have three different phases, one before the load of the beam of the span in general, the phase of load directly, with the maximum result that you can read here. And after, you can understand if the deflection return and the maximum value return to the normal and initial value, or has a residual displacement like in this case. So the key points of today's presentation is, of course, to give you an idea of a possible solution with our system and our technology. Is important to highlight that starting from the data that you can collect with our system, with our sensor, you can have different access to the platform and different level of analysis in the data, because you have the possibility to see, for example, raw data from from the different sensors together. But of course, our goal is to provide also this different type of tool that today I show you, the tiltmeter chain tool, but also the static deflection tool. But I want to have, for example, move intelligence, because our goal is to give to the customer not only a hardware solution or a software solution, but a solution that allow you to understand very quickly the response of your structure for the different condition. So different levels of access to the data, and that you can read directly in raw data, but also analyze with the different tools that you find in our platform. Now, time for question and answer. Okay. Perfect. So we have two different questions for the moment. So, okay, how many teeth did you use in these examples? Okay, perfect. So, uh, for the static and for the teeth meter chain tool, you can use a minimum quantity of sensor that depending, of course, of application. For example, for the static deflection tool, the minimum sensor that you can use is 3 or 4, depending of the length of the span. But of course, we recommend, if you have, for example, if you have a beam that is more than, I don't know, 50 meters, to use 6 sensor or more for the analysis of the deflection. Of course, the method that we use to make the calculation uh, is based on the point that you have in your beam, basically in your lens. So more more point of measurement that you have in your beam is better, of course, to for the result that you obtain. But in general, we the number of recommend number of fields that you need to use is for the static deflection tool, I think minimum 4 sensor for beam or span. For the meter chain tool, there is no a minimum value. Would you have the possibility to use 1 sensor or 100, of course, depending the strata that you need to monitor, of course. Okay, I think that we answer also at the other question to understand how many we need for the tools. So in general, I told you, in general, we need for the static deflection, minimum 4 sensors. For the tiltmeter chain tool, the minimum in is one, but of course you discretize the length with one sensor. Of course, if you have, for example, a vertical structure like, for example, a building, and you want to understand the stability of the building, depending, of course, of the height of the structure, but of course, we recommend to use more point, more tilt in the same section. So, depending, of course, from the height of the structure. So, um, another question is regarding the minimum acquisition time of the sensor. And with this question, we answer also with the data that you can obtain with the tool. So with the new version of the sensor, with the new version of the tiltmeter V4 that you can find on the market today, you can record an event every 30 seconds. So every 30 seconds, you have the possibility to record the angle from the sensor, the two angles. And with these two angles, you have the possibility to obtain and use these angles to calculate or the static deflection or, for example, the tiltmeter chain tool. So the minimum acquisition time for the sensor is 30 seconds, and we obtain in the same way the result for the static deflection tool. So this means, for example, that if you have the static deflection tool with the sensor configured with every 30 seconds, you obtain the data and the static deflection every 30 seconds. Uh, yeah, another question is regarding the setting configuration. Of course, yes. In the future, we want to give the possibility to modify the sensor, edit the sensor of of the different sensor in a unique page without give the possibility to modify sensor by sensor. So the idea is, of course, to give the possibility to the customer to modify the setting for the sensor in one time in a unique page without to go in the single sensor and change the specific, for example, acquisition time for the different sensor um, uh, one time. So, is there okay, sure. Another question is regarding the result that you can obtain from the deflection measurement. So, this is a method that you can, of course, used to obtain the maximum deflection, for example, in a different type of structural application. You obtain a value with incredible accuracy of the deflection because the data, and this is a point I want to highlight before, start from a sensor with incredible accuracy. The method that we obtain from to calculate the deflection is something that is only a mathematical formula. So the error is something that you can find only in, for example, or in the installation phase because you in the installation phase you install one sensor in, I don't know, 1 meter um, uh, in 1 meter respect to the initial point, and you uh, decide to assign 1.5 meters in the platform, and so the result that you obtain is something that is not uh, with not an incredible accuracy. So if you follow the step of the installation, so you take the right measurement from the different initial point of the sensor, and you set all the information in the right way in the platform, the error that you obtain is the error of the sensor that you have. And our customer use this sensor in combination, of course, for example, with the total station. And so, for example, it is a common question uh, to give you an idea of the accuracy between the normal data that you obtain with, for example, with the total station. I can tell you that our customer in general try our system and the configuration of the system in the right way, in place in a structure, in the combination with the total station, and obtain the same result. And so we can, for example, if you want to share with you also some result that our customer obtain on the field regarding this point. Of course, we can test together in one of your application. You can test the sensor and the total station to see the result that you obtain one and the other. We have another question now regarding. Uh, okay, so we are another question regarding the field meter chain, and the one of the application that we can have with the field meter chain tool. So basically, you can use the tool, I think, in two different ways, depending, of course, on the application, on the structure. You can split your or vertical or horizontal chain in two different ways, depending on the structure. I I need to highlight. Or you can use a T-beam to connect different points together, and so you discretize the length in with the tilt beam. Or, for example, for other type of structure, for example, vertical structure, you can assume that the different floors together, and you can divide for example, the building for the different floors. In this case, you don't need to use the beam, but you install directly the sensor in the structure. But of course, I can share with you later other information if you need. We have another question. So, regarding the displacement, if we can obtain the displacement from each sensor without the Excel tool, the answer is no in general, because the sensor with a single sensor, you can obtain the angles, only the angles. This means that if you want, in our platform, you have the possibility to uh, see the value of the angles, for example, in degree. But for example, another unit that you can select in the preference is, for example, millimeter on meter. Millimeter on meter is another way to see the angle rotation with a more familiar value on the displacement, because you start from degree or you obtain millimeter on meter, but it's the same way to tell you rotation. So in general, no, we can obtain data displacement from the single tip meters. You can modify the preference of the unit on the setting, and you can see the angle value or in a degree or in millimeter or meter or in other way. So you can choose your unit in the setting page. If you want to obtain a displacement, you need to use one of our tool. Without one of our tool, you can obtain displacement, like with the static deflection, you obtain the shape of the deflection, or with the tiltmeter in chain, you can obtain practically your section and your profile of deformation divide different segment on the section itself. Okay, so I think that we told you all regarding this new different tool. Feel free if you have other doubts or questions, or you want to only, I don't know, uh, have a chat regarding a specific point or to have more information to book a call, a meeting with us, or send just a message to understand and discover more your doubts and answer. And so, thank you for your time, and I hope that you enjoy in this webinar, and I hope to see you again to have a chat with you in the future. So, thank you very much, and have a good day.